What's up, Make Pop Music? It's Austin Hull from Austin Hull Audio and Visual and Make Pop Music, and I am back. I know we've been away for a little while. If you're subscribers of the channel or followers, you might have noticed we haven't uploaded in like a month and a half, kind of 2 months. We just needed a little time away to kind of work on other stuff with the channel and with our group, and we've been working on a lot of stuff behind the scenes and kind of under the radar, which you'll kind of start finding out over the next couple of weeks and couple of months. So we're super excited about all that, but it took so much time and effort, so we had to scale back on the channel a little bit. But now that we're back to our regularly scheduled program. So let's actually talk about why we're here today. I get the question a lot, how do you make or how do you process vocal chops specifically for pop music instead of like electronic music? And I just released a song, Small Talk, and there is a hook where I have kind of a vocal chop that carries that kind of lead main melody. And a lot of people listened to it and wanted me to do a tutorial, so I figured, why not? Let's go ahead and hop in. And I'm going to show you A, how to create the rhythm of a vocal chop, B, how to set a melody to a vocal chop, especially if that melody doesn't really coincide with the vocals that you specifically drag in there. And then C, we're going to go ahead and talk about actually how to process those vocal chops, ways to layer it, make it really, really interesting and full and just really, really exciting for your production. So without further ado, let's actually just hop into Cubase and check it out. Now we're actually in Cubase. Let's go ahead and take a look at what the final result's going to sound like. So this is going to be a main vocal chop, a spacey vocal chop underneath that, and a low vocal chop underneath that. So we're going to look at the vocal chop, how to make it, and then how to process it in all three of these different ways. So let's hop right in and let's just see how to do that. So for now, I'm going to turn off the spacey vocal chop and the low vocal chop so we can just focus on this main. And when I first wrote this song, I had actually written it in a different key, 2 semitones up. And I had already made the vocal chop, so instead of just re-chopping it, I just turned it down 2 semitones. So if you hear it in a different key right now, that's kind of why. And then I'll show you what it sounds like when I used auto-tune to actually turn that down to the right key. So let's go ahead and duplicate this so we don't mess this up too much. And let's just kind of take a look at what this sounds like. So here's what it sounds like with no processing, with just a chop.
But baby, we don't have to fall in love.
So that's what it sounded like with nothing. So basically what you want to do when you're creating a vocal chop is find the rhythm. So I knew that this hook going in, I really, really wanted that da 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 da. Like what I do with my vocal chops is I kind of sing them over the track first to then figure out what my end goal is. So I just kind of sat here. Da, 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 da. And like I just kind of played around with the rhythm and with the melody, doing it like that. And then it's really just as easy as kind of finding your little hits. So here is, let's see what this whole thing was. This is what the whole line was.
Time, but baby, we don't have to fall in love.
So I just took that la right there from love, and that became the. And then it's really just as easy as like actually copying it to the grid. So we've got. And then for this next part, you'll hear right here. We really didn't do anything crazy. This is where I'm going to kind of show you how to create the pitch in a little while. So for right now, we just have. Let me turn off the reverb and delay sense just so you can hear it completely dry. So this is what it sounds like. I just took that same little vowel sound, and you can take really whatever kind of vowel or consonant sounds you want to create your chop. Some songs I'll use different pieces of the actual line, so it kind of creates that more like chopped and screwed effect where it's kind of bouncing around from phrase to phrase. But for this one, I just wanted a really, really simple kind of atonal da 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 da, because it was such a synth line. I just wanted to kind of make a synth out of my vocal. So here's what it sounds like with no processing. So then what you do once you have your actual rhythm is I'll bounce it down. So in Cubase, it's just render in place. Make sure my render settings are solid. And then I'm going to bounce that down to a new vocal. So then once we get there, the key is actually getting everything to the right note. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to go in Very Audio. You could use Melodyne, you could use Auto-Tune, you could use just kind of manual editing if you want. So what we're going to do is we're going to set everything to the right line, and I'm going to straighten this out because it's just a little chop. So let's hear actually what it sounded like, because now that it's 2 semitones up, it's kind of... So all we need to do is we've got... That's it. Just take that one up. So we've got... Let's try this. So let's see. So this is it. This is just the whole chop. And then you really could kind of reorganize this however you want. I mean, you could go... And I mean, that's kind of the beauty of vocal chops, is you just pick that sound you want, then you pick that rhythm, and then once you take it into something like this where you can edit the pitch of each little syllable or each little phrase, there's really, really endless possibilities to where you could just operate this like a whole synth. We could have easily had something like this. Let's see. 1, 2. We could have gone from B flat major, we could go... Let's see. Could have had something like this. But I just wanted something really, really simple, which is where you kind of get that line that we ended up with.
But baby, we don't have to fall in love.
So now we've got the actual vocal chop. Let's go ahead and talk about processing. So just to kind of recap how to get that vocal chop, find the vowel or the consonants that you want to use. It could either be one, or you could take little phrases, cut them together, piece them together, don't worry too much about melody, and then bounce that down, take that into a melodic editor or something like Very Audio, Melodyne, Auto-Tune, Flex Pitch, any of those kind of things will work. Then that's where you can set the melody. So focus on groove, then melody. And right now, let me just show you what this sounds like in this alone. I'm going to go ahead and turn on Auto-Tune. That way it's actually in the key. You can see we took it down 2 semitones because I took it down a whole step. And you'll see right here we kind of play around with this throat, this little Formant option. And that's where we're going to get a lot of this like little movement. So you can see it automated right here. So listen closely.
But baby, we don't have to fall in love.
And then I'm just setting that to the same sends that my normal vocals are on, just so it kind of sits in the same place where a vocal would sit. Because in this part of the song, there is no lead vocal. So with Auto-Tune set to the key of the song, and then just kind of playing around with that automated Formant or throat, kind of like the Black Bear effect that we've done before on the channel, and then the actual sends that the vocals are already going to, this is what it sounds like. So you can tell that everything's starting to come together, especially with that movement in the Formant. Let's go ahead and talk about other processing. So this is not doing anything special, just kind of processed it like I would a lead vocal, so it sits in that same kind of element. Just taking out a little bit of low end and compressing it with a normal 1176, you know, super, super fast attack and release, mix at 100. Doing some work here, I think we're gonna get like 7 to 10 dB of gain reduction. And I really, really like to compress my vocal chops a lot, just so they're sitting in the same spot in a mix. So unless I want them super dynamic, I'm gonna squeeze them really, really hard. Then we're just gonna DS, so we're taking away any kind of weird sibilance that we're gonna get, especially after pitching it down and using some of those throat controls. Nothing really to show there. Compressing it a little bit more with a 2A just to make sure that nothing's really peeking through too much. And you can tell that we lost a little bit of gain. That's okay for now, we'll add it back in just a second. I'm going to take out some of these lows because they're really, really boxy. especially with it being turned down 2 semitones. This section right here was unbearably overloaded when we started raising the gain. Then we're going to DS again to make sure that after we have added a little bit more compression and some EQ, we're still not going to get any annoying little sounds.
But baby, we don't have to fall in love.
You can see we're just getting a little bit on that little "baby we don't have to fall in love" phrase, just because it was sticking out just a little bit. Now let's actually get into the interesting part of this processing. So I'm going to add a doubler, and I'm using the effect doubler for voices. It's basically just doing a little bit of a pan. It's kind of spreading out little different versions of this vocal, and it's using a mixture of delay by milliseconds, kind of like a Hass effect, and then it's also detuning a little bit. So we're going to get like the detuned width effect of like a synth would, like a saw synth or something like that, and then we're going to get that kind of spread out Hass effect where we're going to get just a little bit of width. So check it out now. This is going to make it sound a lot more like a synth in the track. And that's going to give it that cool, like, chorusy, phasey, wide, like, really, really in-your-face sound. If you don't have doubler, you can normally pick it up on sale when they have the sales running, or you can just use, like, your stock chorus or stock phaser, or just, like, a mixture of the two. Basically, anything that's going to spread it out, either with time delay or with detune delay, and then just give it that little bit of a nice little sheen the doubler adds, which I like a lot. So let's go ahead and actually hop into what I think makes this vocal chop, and that is Kiloheart's Snap Heap, which was just added to the Slate bundle last month. And I found this really, really, really cool preset. I'm not doing anything outside of the preset. Literally just found it as I was scrolling through one day, and I was like, I can probably use that later, and remembered it when I was in this song. So play around with all of your VSTs. Have a little fun with it and experiment, because sometimes, especially if you're working on a lot of music, it gets really monotonous and you start kind of doing the same things over and over again. This, to me, is what took the vocal chop and made it super interesting, because it's adding a little bit more movement and dynamic. And you can see these Formant filters right here going crazy, and that's basically doing what we're doing with that Formant control in Auto-Tune, but it's actually doing it with a filter and adding a little bit more of an effect. So to me, that added another really, really, really nice bit of movement that I think that it needed, especially to be such a main element. But since it took out a lot of the high end, I wanted to distort it, so I used a decapitator on a really, really bright setting on the Neve button right here, and then have it pretty wet. So here's what it sounds like with distortion out in the mix. That's helping it come back up to the front of that mix again. That way it's just not getting really, really lost, especially after Snap Heat kind of brought all of that down with the Formant filter. So I like Decapitator a lot. It's normally my go-to saturation. You could also use something like FabFilter Saturn. Most DAWs have like a distortion or a tube saturation or something like that. Just drive that pretty hard and you'll get a little bit of that kind of like crunchy, gainy sound, which is kind of gross, honestly, and it can really, really stick out on certain speakers, but we'll handle that in 1 second. The next thing that I'm going to do is add a little bit of extra reverb, because I want this to kind of wash out. We've got the reverb and delay that the main vocals are going to, but I still want this to sit a little bit behind that so it sounds like a synth. So here's what it sounds like with this delay right here. We've just got the bright 2.4 under the 250, wetness at 25%, and here's what it sounds like. So it's just adding a little bit of extra width and depth. You know how I like using my reverbs for width, depth, and character. And to me, this is kind of doing all three. Another really, really important part is, since we have a 4 on the floor, just poof, 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 I kind of wanted this vocal to sidechain. But since it's just a 4 on the floor, I didn't really feel like setting up a sidechain. So I just used Kickstart by Nicky Romero on a 4th setting, where it's just doing this nice and tight. And this, to me, was really what solidified it. After this, we're just going to clean it up with some EQ. But this is basically where the vocal chop processing is finished. And that sidechain, to me, is killing it. So I love it. I love it with this. Really, once you look from the doubler down, that's where you start getting all the sauce of this vocals chop. The snap heap, it's adding a nice little bit of movement and some Formant filtering, which gives it such a cool effect to me. Decap, just giving it some more high end and making it pop forward in the mix. Washing it out a little bit with Verb Suite, and then letting that sidechain really hit, so that kick and snare can really drive that hook, because that's the whole vibe of the song. After that, we're just going to clean it up a little bit, where I take out a little bit of that low end, especially since Decapitator started boosting it. Scoop out a little bit more of this 300 because it's kind of boxy. The 750 is kind of honky, and this is kind of telephony. So let's go through so you can actually hear each frequency and why I cut it. So that frequency just gets in the way of all the other synths, just kind of clutters it up. You can tell that 300 is just kind of like boxy and weirdly low mid honky. Not really doing anything for fullness. It's kind of just getting in the way of all of the other synths as well. That's really smoothing it out. When I take a lot of that 750 out, that's really helping it sit in the mix a little bit better, to where it's not so on top of everything. And then right here in this like almost 1200. That section got really overloaded with the distortion and that Formant processing, so I wanted to make sure that we clear that up. Otherwise, you get that really like nasally, like telephonic effect that sounds really gross. Here's what it sounds like before and after EQ. Here's before. So now it's actually sitting in the mix instead of sitting on top of the mix. So I really like that. However, since we've mangled it so much, I still wanted some of the clarity, especially when the line, but baby, we don't have to fall in love comes back in. Let me delete this so I don't get that confused. That's a vocal chop that we actually made earlier. Let's go to this spacey vocal chop and just listen to what it's doing. Basically doing the same thing. We've got doubler again on doubler 4 voices. We don't have snap peep on this one, and we don't have decap on this one, because those to me were just destroying the sound, which I loved. However, I want this added in for some extra little clarity and presence. And we're gonna drive the reverb quite a bit harder at 35%, which is gonna wash it out even more. So this is kind of gonna be like almost how I would process an ad lib, and we're gonna poke it way behind the main actual vocal chop, just so it's giving a little bit of extra depth and width with that delay kind of, or that, I'm sorry, that reverb hitting a little bit harder. And then since we're not filtering it so much and distorting it so much, we get a lot of that top end sheen that's not aggressive, but it provides clarity and brightness. And again, side chaining it. Again, taking out that telephonic effect and that kind of tubby, just low mids. And here's what it sounds like now. It's the same exact vocal chop all the way up until snap peep and decap process the same, then just EQ'd a little bit differently after that with a little bit of extra reverb. So here's what it sounds like without that and with that in the mix. So here's without it. So you can really hear it making a difference on that baby, we don't have to fall in love. Here's them stacked over top of each other. And then the last thing that we're gonna do, again, we just duplicated that main vocal chop. I believe that this is pretty much the exact same settings. Yep, 25%. We just kind of low scooped out, or low passed out at like 150. And then this is just turned down a whole octave. So we've got -12 right here. And then since we were down 2, I had to take it down another -2 with a little altar boy. But it's just down an octave from that main vocal. So here's what that sounds like. And this one we don't have that extra doubler on, because snap heap is already adding some width, and I didn't want this low vocal to sit in the exact same spot as the normal vocal chop and the shimmery vocal chop. So I didn't have quite as much width, and then I just had snap heap kind of giving it that Formant width and filter width. So here's what it sounds like without it. Very, very, very subtle, but when you listen to all three of these together, the difference of, you know, this and then what we've got with all of the processing and the layering and the stacking is really night and day. And that's why I like to kind of walk you through these tutorials, is because there's a lot of stuff that you're probably not hearing or noticing that's in songs that when it goes unnoticed, you might miss it when you're doing your own productions. However, you still feel like there's a lack of something. So kind of adding these in to where you don't really hear them, but you feel them and they fill it out, is really, really the key from taking something from sounding like a demo production or something that's a little bit unfinished, or maybe something that's a little bit bare or even hard to mix, to something that is just super, super full, super in your face, very punchy. You can do this kind of same thing with drums where you're stacking kicks and snares to create depth and width. So I'm glad I got to take you through and show you exactly how to set the rhythm of a vocal chop, how to actually get that vocal chop to the melody that you have in your head, and then how to process it so it feels like an important part of the song and not just a vocal that you've kind of chopped and screwed to sit in the background. So hopefully this tutorial helped, and let's just go ahead and roll to the outro so we can close this bad boy out for you. And that's it. That's Vocal Chops 101. As you can see, every vocal chop is going to start the same way: rhythm, melody, processing, and then whatever you want to do with those, the opportunities and possibilities are endless. You can have them really, really simple. You can have them super complex and complicated. Short, long. You can have like Loud's I Like Me Better, where it's just really him humming, or kind of Chelsea Cutler style. Or you can go like this, a little bit more electronic, where you actually chop stuff up, piece it together, and then process it. So hopefully this gave you a lot of ideas. You know, you've got distortion, you've got delays, reverbs, modulation effects, widening, you've got like side chaining, you can layer them over top of each other in multiple octaves. So all of these things are really, really, really nice ways to create depth in your production. That way your listener is not getting really, really, really bored with just a standard vocal chop with dry processing. So let me know kind of what you're doing with your vocal chops. If you do anything that's a little different, I'd love to hear it. If you did like this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. We really appreciate it, and it helps out our channel more than you could possibly imagine. If you want more tutorials like this, let us know what you want. And if you want more information now, you can go to our website, makepopmusic.com, where we have courses, samples, we've got just extra little blog posts, MIDI packs, all kinds of stuff. So definitely go check it out. We appreciate all the love and support. Let us know what you guys want to see next time. And as for now, that's going to be it. Much love, Make Pop Music. Peace out.
Tonight, I'll take you to the back.